Hey fellow gliders, welcome back. In today's episode we're going to take a look at item packs or card packs or item chests. Pick your vernacular. So the premise is that your users can go to your store, purchase a pack of items, and then have a probability of winning some valuable prizes. So the first thing we have to do is set up that probability. So we're going to come over here to our data editor, go to our store, and create a new column here called Rarity. In this case, I'm using 4 different types of rarities: common, uncommon, rare, and epic, but you can pick whichever ones you'd like. And then I'm going to go ahead and define what the rarity is of that item. I'm also using this column to determine whether or not an item will appear in a pack at all by leaving that item blank. So in this case, I have a chest of items that they can purchase, but I don't want them to win another chest of items within that chest. So I'm leaving the rarity blank. The next step is to actually add your pack. So here I created a row called medium chest. I'm using a chest of items rather than a pack of cards. And so I added medium chest. I'm saying it's unique because we only want them to have one at a time. And then I had some art, and I defined the category it belongs to. In this case, it's a chest of items, and then the cost. Next, we need to create the environment in which they're going to be opening up this pack. So I'm going to create a brand new table. This is going to be what's known as a working table. So it's a new table in my sheet here that is going to be used for calculation purposes only. I'm not storing any permanent data there. So because I'm not storing any permanent data, I'm not going to add this as a sheet to my Google Sheet. Instead, I'm just going to add a new glide table. So a new empty table, and I called it item chest. But again, if you're doing like card packs, call it that instead. So in my item chest table, the very first thing I did was add a row ID column. It's always best practice to add a row ID column when you're adding new tables to your app. And then just add the amount of rows that you want for the amount of items that they can potentially win inside of your pack. So if you're doing a 3-card card pack, have 3 rows. I have a 5-item chest, so I'm doing 5 rows. And then next, you're going to add some sort of index column here. This can be whatever you want it to be. You can do numbers or letters as long as the 5 values here are different from one another. The reason why we're going to need this is we need to have a randomized value for our card packs, right? We don't want them to get the same 5 cards or same 5 items every time. So we need to create this randomized experience. So you do need to have 5 unique values. And what we're ultimately going to do is have a template column here. I called this seed copy or whatever. That's going to combine my index, my 0 through 4, which you can see here as the rightmost value in this column, along with a unique value that gets generated when they open the pack. Okay. So at this point, we're going to stop in this table and then build out that functionality. So I'm going to do one more thing. Head over to your users table and add a new column here called latest chest ID and make it user specific. So I added a new text column. I called it latest chest or latest card pack ID, and you're going to again make it user specific. Okay. And what we're going to do here is that whenever they open up this item or use this item, we're going to write a new value, unique value to this column. Okay. All right, so here we have this latest chest ID. Okay, then back over in your item chest table, we're going to grab that value as part of the template. Okay, so in my item chest table, I'm going to create a template column. I'm calling it seed because that's what this next column is referring it to as a seed. So I'm calling it seed. And I'm adding 2 values, just 1 and then 2. And then we're having 2 replacements, 1 and 2. So the first replacement is the user profile, latest chest ID, which we just created. And the second value is going to be that index column. So just merging the 2 things together. And that index, again, is your randomized number here, or your unique value here of 0 through 4 or A through E or pick it. But again, what you're going to see here is that you have 5 unique values. That's a merging of your index that you created plus that new pack ID that's going to get generated when we open up a new pack. All right, if you want to test this out before actually building it, head over to your users table here, right? Find your row that you're previewing as. So if I'm previewing as this person here, I'll just find that person's row, okay? And just enter in any value here for now. You can just put in the letter 1 or the letter A or the number 1 or something. Just put in something here, all right? And you should see that whatever value you throw in there now is the value that gets populated as part of that seed in addition to the index. Okay, so you see it's just a merging of the two things. All right, next we're going to create a randomized probability based upon this seed. So I added a new column. This column is the random number column. So if you go to add a new column, that's located underneath the other section, number, and then random number. Or you can just search for random number and it'll find it. Okay. And then for this random number, when you go to configure this column, it's going to ask you for what the seed is. So then just make that template column, your seed template column. I have a precision here of 0.00, but it can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't really matter. Okay. And then you don't need a group separator. And then you don't need any units for this. Hit done. All right, and so you'll see it'll generate a randomized number based upon the seed. Okay, and again, the reason why we need to craft this seed value with a template is because we want the probabilities to change every time we open up a new card pack. All right, so then based on this probability, then we're going to have an if-then-else column to define the rarity that represents that probability. So this is completely up to you. I'm going based off of a suggestion of a user that on Twitter that asked me if they could have a certain probability here be representative of that rarity. So in my if-then-else column, right, I'm going to just check to see if the probability is less than a certain number, and if so, it's going to spit back the rarity that matches that probability. So if the probability is less than 0.04, then it's going to be epic, right? So you start with your most rare case first. Okay, then you continue on. If the probability is less than 0.11, meaning it's like a 10% chance or 11% chance, right? Then rare. If it's less than 0.25%, so it's a 25% chance, right? Then it's going to be uncommon. Otherwise, it's a 75% chance that you're going to get just a common card. Okay, so we have that same thing: epic, rare, uncommon, and common. And these four values need to match your rarity column exactly in your store. Okay, so now we see we have, it spits back the rarity based upon the probability. So here we have a 0.012. So that's less than 3%. So it actually spit back an epic card for me here, right? Rather, these are all above 25%. So these are just common cards that I got. Okay. If it's here where you also, I mean, it's possible that you get 5 common cards if they're all above 25%, right? So if you want to ensure that, yes, every single pack is going to have at least one uncommon or something, what you can do as part of this if then else is create a case here that says, hey, if the index equals a specific value, so in this case, my index is 0 through 4, so I could do if index equals 0, which is my first row, then I could say then uncommon, right? And then you would just make that the first case here, right? So now you see that it doesn't matter what the probability is of this first row, it's always going to be an uncommon card that they get as that first card. So that's something you can do as well if you want to ensure that they at least get something that's of value. But I'm not doing that. So if they get 5 commons, they get 5 commons. That's their choice. All right, so hit done. All right, so now we have rarity. And so now what we can do is relate the rarity of the card or the item that was won to the list of available items. So we're going to create a relation column, a multiple relation column here. That's going to match our if then else rarity to our store rarity column that we created. And we're going to match multiple. And this will bring back a list of items, right, that matches that rarity. So we see here I only have one epic card, or one epic item, it's a summoning stone. But I have here many common items which bring back all of these values here. Okay, so from this list of related items, we now want to pick a randomized item from that list. So that's going to be a single value column. I'm calling it random item. And it's a single value column. It's going to pick at random, right, one of those items from the relation. And ultimately what I want to grab is the item ID of that item. So through the relation to items, which is again the relation of the rarity, I'm going to grab the row ID, and it's going to give me a random item from this list of associated rarity items. And so again, the summoning stone only has one item here, but otherwise it's going to pick a random item from this list. Okay, now this single value random is very volatile. It changes on every single button push and screen change that you do. So what we need to do is capture the actual item that's being randomized here and capture it into a new column, and I'm calling it random item saved. So when they go to open up that item, it's going to take this value and write it into this random item saved column. And then from here, this will be the item that they actually win. So they're going to win the item that we're saving here, not this volatile randomized item that's going to keep on changing every 2 seconds. So if you want to mimic that right now, what you can do is you should have a list of randomized items at this point. You can just select all of these and copy. I'm just doing a Command C to copy. I'm going to create a new column here called random item saved. It's just a text column because it's going to house the item ID for this randomized item, and make it user specific because we don't want my items to override somebody else who's opening up a pack right now, right? So all of your columns here need to be user specific if it presents you that option. So you can go ahead and copy and then come over here and then paste. Just do a Command V. Right now you see the two match. And you see that the items that it found were the summoning stone, and then linen, string, wood, wood. So these are the 5 items that I'm going to win in my pack. Okay, so then from here I have this random item saved, and now I'm going to create a relation, again, from this random item saved ID to the actual item in the store. So I created a new relation here called rel random item. And this would be like maybe random item saved. I just got rid of the word saved. And where I'm relating the random item saved back to the store row ID. I'm not matching multiple because it should only ever match one item. Okay, so it found those 5 items. And then I'm bringing back some information here. I'm bringing back the name of the item in a lookup column called item name, and then a new lookup column called item image, because I want to ultimately display the name of the item and the image of the item when they go to open up this item in the pack. Okay, so in addition to the seed that I brought over here, which is the temporary value plus the index, I also need to see whether or not the item that I'm winning here is a new item or if it's one from a previous pack. So I need to track just the ID of that seed here. So I have a template column that's just grabbing the latest ID again from my user profile, but I'm not merging it with the seed. It's just the ID itself. And my thought is that when they go to open up a new item, we're going to have an element of surprise, right? So we need to compare whether or not the ID that is the current pack that they opened, if it matches the current session that they're in, the opened card. So we're going to compare these two values. Right, so I'm going to create another column here called open chest ID or open pack ID. And what we're going to do here is part of the functionality eventually is whenever they open up this item, we're going to take this value and write it here. So this whatever value is here, whether it's empty or if it's from a previous card pack that they opened, the new chest ID will override the previous chest ID. And then we'll compare the two to see whether or not it is the current pack that they're opening or if it's a previous pack. Okay. So again, I'm bringing back the ID. And then I have a user-specific text column that's just called open chest ID. And then an if-then-else that's comparing the two. Is this item, is the opened ID, is it the current card pack that I purchased, right? So this is an if-then-else. That's just checking to see if the new chest ID, if it is the open chest ID. If so, I'll spit back true, else I'll spit back false. Okay, so we see here that A does not match this open chest ID yet, because I haven't opened up any card packs yet. But the moment that I open up an item, it's going to write the value here, and then it'll mark that value as true. Okay, so that's the thought process. All right, then I want to grab how many items have been opened already. So if I have a 5-card card pack, I'm going to count how many have been opened. So I'm going to count how many trues there are. So that's a roll-up column. And I'm going to create a new roll-up column called count open items. And it's going to be a summary of the values of my work table, my item chest, then is the current chest. So that if then else of that comparison of whether or not the A matches that ID, right? And then I'm going to count how many trues there are, right? So right now there are 0 trues, so it's spitting back 0 for everything. But the moment that I open up an item, right, I now have 1 true, so it spit backs the number 1 across all of my items. All right, the reason for this is because I want to see, once I get to that last item, when I'm opening up that last item, I want to have some functionality where they get taken back to their inventory, and I need that condition to make that happen. Okay, next I have 2 columns here that are just some if-then-elses, and this is just for novelty. This is just to have some element of surprise. So I have here an if opened image and an if opened item name. So what I want to display is that they haven't yet opened up the item yet. We're going to display like a hidden, maybe the card back, or if it's an item chest, I'm going to have like a hidden bag. So I have here just this dummy image that I found of this bag with a question mark on it, and I'm using that URL here if it's not the if the item hasn't been opened yet, right? So I'm checking to see if this box is checked. Because if it's checked, that means they've opened the item. So if the box is checked, then I'm going to display that item image. I want them to see the item that they won. Otherwise, I'm going to display that dummy image. And you see that because they're all blank, it's just the dummy image for all of them. Okay, same thing for the item name. If it hasn't been opened yet, then it's going to display nothing, else I'll actually show them the item that they won, the item name. Okay. For our tutorial, when they open up a pack, I want them to swipe through the cards or swipe through the items before opening them. So I'm going to use a swipe layout, which means I need to have a column that is housing the time that they swiped. That's just part of the setup for having a swipe layout. So I have a column here called date time swiped. Again, it's user specific. And it's a date time column. We'll tap into this in a bit. Okay, and the very last thing here is a relation back to the current user. We do this all the time. So I have a template column here called current user, where it's just grabbing the user's email address, so user profile, email. All right, so the very last thing we have to do is clean up after ourselves here. So we need to be able to delete our card pack automatically after they've opened up that last item. So to do that, we need to talk to our inventory where our card pack exists, right? When they purchase a card pack or purchase an item sheet, it's going to have that item as part of the inventory. So we need to delete that row that has that card pack on it. So my thought is that whenever we have whenever they purchase a new card pack, this medium chest, for example, it's going to create a new row in our inventory with that pack. It's going to have a new row ID for that item. This row ID for that item is going to be the seed we use for the latest chest ID, right? And then we can bring in this value into our our item chest, right? And then this new chest ID can talk back to our inventory because this ID here is the row ID of the item pack in our inventory. And because that ID lives on all 5 rows, it doesn't matter what item we open up last, it can talk back to our inventory. And because we have this relation now of that new ID to our inventory row ID, we can do some things with that relation, right? We can actually delete an item through that relation. So that's also why we wanted to know how many items have been opened, because on that very last item, we'll have an action that will delete our card pack through this relation. Okay, so our data tables have been set up correctly, right? We have this item chest working table. We have our column, our new column inside of our store that is going to have a rarity. Okay, and we have in our users table, we have this user-specific chest ID that we can bring in as part of the functionality here. All right, now let's actually build the opening of the pack. So I'm going to go ahead and first purchase a pack, so that way I actually can work with the interface here. So I'm going to go to my store, and I'm going to find my card pack here, and I'm going to purchase it. All right, that item should now be in my inventory, and it is. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my chest. And then from here, we can probably just tap into this Use Item button. We're going to add a condition to check to see whether or not the item that we're using is a card pack or is a chest. So I'm going to go ahead and edit our write action here. And I'm going to add in a new condition here. So you can just add, hit a little plus button next to here, and you're going to check to see if the item category of this item is pack or is chest, whatever the category you're using for your collection of items, right? In my case, I'm using chest. So if it is chest, I want a whole new experience. So as part of that experience, the first thing we have to do is capture the row ID of our card pack, of our chest, back to our user profile table so that we can use that as the seed, right? So I have here a set column value through our rel user that we had created earlier, and I'm writing in our latest chest ID the row ID of that chest in our inventory. Okay, so we're setting that seed value. Next, we're going to do a show new screen. We can call it open chest or open card pack, and the data is going to be our working table, that item chest. Okay, so we're creating a brand new interface for opening up our card pack. Okay, hit save. And so now when I hit use item, okay, I now have a brand new screen. We'll build this in just a second. But on the back end, you should see that our users table has a new ID in it, right? And it's part of our latest chest ID. It starts with XEIZ. And this should match our row ID of our inventory. So in our inventory, if I go to our chest here, we see that the row ID is this XEIZ. Okay, so now our latest chest ID is matching our row inside of our users table. Okay, and then you should be able to see, if you were just kind of toy around here in our item chest, we see that our seed has been populated correctly with the row ID plus our index. That should also be here as well. Our new chest ID got populated. Because we generated a new ID, it should not match whatever we have here, so all of our values should be blank. 0 should be our number. And we should have a relation now to the chest in our inventory. Okay, so just verify those things before moving forward. Okay, so again, back in our layout view, the interface that I want for our users is to be able to swipe through those 5 cards, those 5 items, and then be able to open up that item. So for our detail screen here, I am choosing a swipe layout. And on this swipe layout, I only have 3 components, right? I have an image component, a button, and a text component. The image is just showing the if item image, or the if opened image, which again is going to display that dummy image until they open the card, and then otherwise it'll change to the actual item image. I have text with the same thing. It's just going to show the if item name. So this could be the item or if item name. So it's going to take a look at whether or not I've opened the item. And if so, it's going to display the name of the item. Otherwise, it's keeping it hidden for now. And then the magic here is going to be in this button. So I'm going to create a new button, and I'm going to create a new action on this button called open item. Okay, the last little piece of information we have to do here for the swipe list is we also have to define the save last swipe. And again, that's going to write to that date time swiped user specific column that we created. We don't need to format or sort, or we don't need to show a search bar for anything here, right? So we don't really need to format the swipe screen beyond that. And then for your actions, your left and right action, we don't want it to do anything when we're swiping left and right. We just want to navigate around. So I've removed the actions from our left and right action for part of the swipe screen. It's just a navigation purposes only. Okay. All right, now part of the open item button. This is where we're going to configure the actual writing of things. So go ahead and go to your button, and in your action, create a new action here. Create a new action. I'm going to edit my existing action. Okay, and we see that we have 3 different conditions here. So the first condition is we're first going to check to see whether or not we have room in our inventory for the items that we're opening. So we're going to check to see if the user profile, item slot remaining, which we created way back in an earlier episode, if the item slot remaining is less than or equal to 0, which it should never be less than, but if it happens to be, as long as it's less than or equal to 0, that means we don't have any more room. And instead, we're just going to show notification that there's no room available. Go back to your inventory and free up some space. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to assume that they have space. Okay, the next thing we have to check is whether or not it's the last card in the card pack that they're opening, or item chest that they're opening. So I'm going to check to see if that count open items, so if the count open items is less than 4, that means that it's not the last card yet. Then we're going to open the item and add it to our inventory. So to do that, we're going to do a set column value. The first thing we have to do is take that randomized value that we're generating it here and set it to the random item saved. So we're going to set the random item saved column to be our random item. So we're just taking this random item and we're going to write it to our random item saved. Okay, the next thing we have to do is we're going to write the user profile, latest chest ID, right, which is the row ID of the card pack that we purchased. We're going to take this ID and we're going to write it to the opened chest ID, right? So now those 2 values will match, which then makes things true, which then does further logic, right? Okay, and then those are the only 2 things we're writing. Okay, then we're going to add an item to our inventory. Because they've opened up the item, that item should now live in our inventory. So we're going to do an add row. The add row is going to write a new row to our inventory. And there's only 3 columns that we can write. So our email address of our user, the item ID, and the timestamp. So the email will be the user's email address. The timestamp will be the current date and time. And the item ID will be the random item saved. Not the random item, but the random item saved that we just set in this previous step here. Okay, and then we can play a sound that they've opened up the item. Okay, so do that and then hit save. I call it open item. We'll do this 3rd step in just a second. And then test it out. So I'm going to hit open here. We should see that it plays a sound and then writes a new value to our random item saved. And it writes our current card pack, our current ID, to the opened ID, which then makes other logic take place. So I hit open. Okay, it displays the value, displays the image. It looks like we got some string. If I go back to my inventory, I now see that I have string in my inventory. Okay, let's go back to the chest, go back to use item. We're back here again. If I go to the data editor, we should see that we have we have 1 row in here where the chest ID that we have written in our user sheet matches now the open chest ID. That value should be true. And now we have opened 1 item. Right? We see here that because of our relation, we can see that we have the image of the item and the name of the item that matches that value. Okay. So our condition is still being met, that it's still less than 4, right? So as long as I can continue to open up items here. So open, open, open. Okay, but don't open up this last card yet, okay? Because now our condition is 4. Right? So now we're going to get to a third condition as part of the opening, where we're going to not only open the item, but then we need to clean up after ourselves and delete the card pack from our inventory. All right, so I'm going to go and click on the button component on the left-hand side, go back to our action and edit it, and add our third condition. So this is going to be an else condition, and we're going to do the same 3 things here. So we're still going to set the random item and the latest chest ID. We're still going to do an add row to our inventory. And we're still going to play a sound. Okay, but the last thing we want to do here is clean up after ourselves by deleting the card pack or the item chest from our inventory. So we're going to add a delete row action, and we're going to delete the row of that relation to chest and inventory, or card pack and inventory, which was that very last column we created in our working table. Okay, so that'll delete the row. Again, you want to make sure you delete the row after adding items here. So that's why you want to do the first 3 things first. Then we'll delete our row, and then we'll just navigate back a couple of screens. So then that way we're no longer in this opening environment. We're going to go back to our inventory. So we're going to do go back and go back, and then hit save. All right, and then what that should do is you should see temporarily the item that we opened, and then it will go back to our inventory and see that last item. Let's try it out. Open. See, we got an axe. Ooh, nice. And so now we have an axe in our inventory, and our card pack has been removed from our inventory. Okay, so that being said, if we wanted to, we could purchase another card pack. Purchase item. Okay, that now exists in our inventory. And because we purchased a new item here, right, the moment I hit use item, right, it's going to set a new value, the new row ID of that inventory item. You see it's no longer XEI, whatever it was here. Now it's VEC. So we have a new chest ID that's written here. And so that means when we go to open up our items, in our item chest, we see now that these 2 values don't match anymore, right? Our new chest ID doesn't match the open chest ID, which then means things have been reset back to 0. Right? So now the process can continue. All right, so I can open a new item. Ooh, I got a summoning stone. Look at that. Epic. Hit open. Oh, I don't have any more inventory slots available. All right, so I have to go back to my inventory, and then here I can maybe remove some items before continuing. So yes, creating a card pack or an item chest does take a little bit of time and setup, fairly complicated, but hopefully the effort is well worth the reward here when your users have this new gamification mechanic of being able to unlock the chance to have new cards or new items in their inventory. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave me a comment below. You can always reach out to me at Twitter at rpetito, and if you join as a member to my YouTube, you'll actually get a copy of this template for free, so then that way you can hit the ground running when trying to figure this out for yourself. If you have any questions at all, feel free to let me know, and as always, thanks for watching.